really certain.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for participating in the Morgan Allen Associates webinar, in which we will talk about Africa as a partnership and a growth opportunity. My name is Stefano Falciani, and I'm a director and partner at Morgan Allen Associates. Morgan Allen Associates help businesses to address strategic and operational underperformance and help finding solutions to funding and financial problems. We can help clients to develop and implement restructuring strategies, exploit global opportunities, whether through investments, international expansion, new market assessment or development, or through external acquisitions, and optimize their financial structures. It is not a surprise that today's webinar is oversubscribed, given the great panel that we have here to explore this important subject. So let me introduce first Mr. Marco Forgione, Director General at the Institute of Export and International Trade, that will help me to manage this great debate, given his wide experience in international trade policy. So, Marco, please.
Stefano, thank you. Thank you for that generous introduction. I'd like to congratulate Morgan Allen on pulling together and organizing this really timely session to look at the opportunities that exist in and across Africa. The Institute of Export and International Trade is a UK charity. We are a membership association that helps and supports the professionalization of international trade, to provide advice, guidance, and support to businesses who are looking to grow their international trade and their overseas markets. And it's really key that today we are discussing Africa and the opportunities that exist for engagement, trade, and investment in Africa. You know, the statistics around Africa are astounding. When you compare them to the EU, for instance, which has a population of about 448 million and a birth rate that is below the replacement level, and 20% of the population is 65 and over. Compare that with Africa, which has a population of 1.3 billion people. Their birth rate is twice the replacement level, and 60% of the population is under 25. That is an incredible talent pool. And this talent pool is supplemented by Africa's incredible natural resources and commodities. You know, Africa is made up of 55 different nations, but since the 1960s, there has been a determined approach to create a single trading bloc in Africa, and that has the potential to create the most exciting and ambitious trading environment that the world has ever seen. You know, if we look back, there was a European century, there's been an American century, we're currently in the Asian century, and very much the epoch that we are on the cusp of is that of the African era. Now, every continent has been impacted by the global pandemic, and Africa is undergoing its first recession in 25 years. But if we look at actually the impact on GDP, you know, the African GDP last year took a hit of 2.9%, so reduced by 2.9%. But compare that with the UK, where GDP fell by 9.9%, and the EU, which took a 7% hit on its GDP. But despite these challenges, there is cause for great optimism. And that optimism is in part fueled by the digitization agenda. You know, just this week, the G7 has announced that businesses, traders have 12 to 18 months to prepare for full digitization. You know, it is a complete anachronism that in the 21st century, significant trade documentation still requires wet signatures. But what does that mean for Africa? Well, if we look at the reality of it, in Africa, there are 300 million mobile money accounts. That's the highest in the world. The digital revolution that's taking place is being spearheaded by Africa's growing young population and their growing middle class. There are currently 77 million Africans who have a higher secondary or tertiary qualification. By 2040, that's projected, even at the current rate of growth, to hit 165 million, which will rival Asia for that level of qualification. Africa is at the core, the center, the heart of global trade, in part because, you know, for the first time, we have an African woman who is the Director General at the WTO, Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and you know, she is very clearly showing the value of a pan-national, trade-based, rules-based trading environment. On the 1st of January this year, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement became a reality. And that is only going to grow and further integrate the potential both for trade in Africa and trade with Africa. Now, to describe and understand and explore these tremendous wealth of opportunities, Morgan Allen has pulled together an exceptional talent pool for our panel of experts. We have Tigiste Amare, who is the Assistant Director of the Africa Programme at Chatham House. Albert Kasim Dewara, the Deputy CEO at the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, and Ibukun Adebayo, the co-head of Emerging Markets and Strategy at the London Stock Exchange Group. And I'm going to invite each of our panelists to make a short presentation, and we will then open it out into a more general conversation to address some of the questions that have been sent in and to consider the opportunities and potential that Africa now offers. So it's my great pleasure to hand over to Tigiste.
Thank you, Marco, for that very kind introduction. Very comprehensive introduction, I should say. You've done quite a lot of my presentation for me already. As Marco introduced me, my name is Tigiste Amare. I'm the Assistant Director of the Africa Programme at Chatham House. Chatham House is an independent and not-for-profit policy research institute that was established in 1920. So we are a century old. Its initial mission was to ensure that we avoid future world wars, because obviously it was created right after the First World War. But this was later updated to helping governments and societies build a sustainable, secure, prosperous, and just world. So a lot of the work that we do is therefore about translating this in meaningful research and dialogue that can help our key stakeholders of governments and decision makers to have access to quality information. In the Africa program, the department where I work, we do this through deep country expertise, building country expertise of countries, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, and trading this with some of the general, regional, and thematic themes across the continent. Yeah, it would be great if I could get the presentation at this point. Thank you. So I want to start by basically following on what Marco was saying. One of the most exciting things that has happened in recent years in the African continent is the signing and the coming into force of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. A very ambitious and comprehensive agreement covering trading goods, services, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. But the AFCFTA is more than a trade agreement. It's also the continent's flagship project that aims to address the continent's key challenges that are still lingering. Whenever talking about the African continent, I like to start by stating the obvious. And as Marco was saying, it's a huge continent of 54 countries or 55, depending on whether you're using the African Union's definition. It's huge, as you can see, but 54 countries also means it's highly fragmented, both in terms of the the number of countries, but also the markets, of course. But in terms, just to put the size into perspective, if the land can really swallow the size of China, India, the US, and most of Western Europe put together. This is an important point to bear in mind as we talk about population size, which is one of the most commonly discussed topics when you talk about the African continent, especially in recent years. Given its size and complexities, trends in the continent do vary depending on countries and regions. So there are many diverging political systems and consolidation of different governance and economic models. So there isn't one single African narrative or a single model or trend. If we can go, great, thank you. So Africa's population is predicted to increase, and again, this is something that Marco has covered a little. Its current size, from its current size of 1.3 billion, based on 2020 estimates, to over 2 billion by mid of the century, and again to 4 billion by the turn of the century. This is very significant. It's a significant increase, and as you can see here, this, as you can see in the slide, this increase significantly Africa's percentage share of global population. The image you see here are based on estimates made in 2015, but it does give you a clear idea of the significance of this shift. If you can move to the next slide, please. Africa is also defined as the youngest continent because of the size of its youth, around 60% of the population being under the age of 25. And the projected increase in population size is also expected, obviously, to considerably increase the number of African youths. It is, again, also estimated that by 2035, the majority of Africans will live in cities. So we are looking at a significant shift. But some of the regions that will see strong surge in population are currently also relatively poor and environmentally strained. And this is extremely important. And it has led to the narrative that Africa's population growth is some form of a curse because of the urgent needs to create the volume of jobs needed to offer this young people an economic future. But it's obviously, as Marco was saying, also a great opportunity because it creates a big market. It creates a bigger middle class. It does increase the size of its markets. African governments, of course, know this, and they do understand that development aid alone will not address the systemic issue. I say systemic because the size of the population by itself is not the problem. The problem is the structure of the economies. And as such, the emergence of a dynamic private sector and more investment that can create the needed jobs has become extremely high on the agenda of these governments. It's, of course, almost impossible to talk about the African continent without addressing the elephant in the room, conflicts. This is widely covered in the media, so I will not go in details, but there are a few important points to make here. Sorry, if you could go to the previous slide, just to show some of the trends here. A lot of the conflicts there's been quite a lot of conflicts in the continent, about 30 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, so around 65% of countries have experienced some form of armed conflict since independence. This did increase in the first few decades of independence, spiking in the 1990s, but a lot of these conflicts did last for a very short period of time, about 5 years, and only about 22% lasted 11 years or more. So while the conflict narrative is very prominent, these numbers tell us a slightly less scary narrative, which is important in terms of determining what is possible to achieve in the continent. But what we don't often hear is also the frequency and magnitude of, for example, of killings. I read that between the 1960s, when the first African countries gained their independence, and 2008, there has been less killings in Africa than in Asia, for example. Narrative that often hear in the media. But at the moment, of course, this is not to say that we don't have conflict problems anymore, but the form has changed. Currently, what we see more is mobile insurgent groups that move back and forth across national borders, including the so-called Akim, Al-Shabaab, and Boko Haram. But most importantly, we have also seen a sharp rise in protests and riots in recent years due to slow progress in governance, in addressing inequality and feelings of neglect and deprivation. So if you move to the next slide, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the economics, but it's important to note that the continent has gone through deep economic and political transformation in the last 2 decades, especially. We have seen a surge in economic growth, trade, size of middle class, urbanization and modernization, including through the adoption of technology. So there's been quite a lot of exciting narrative emerging from the continent. It has also featured several of the world's fastest growing economies and growing middle class. The trend you see here in this graph is from almost 10 years ago now, and that trend of growth has led to the Africa rising narrative. This trend did slow down in 2005 and 2015 and 2016 due to the drop in commodity prices. And at the moment, we have seen the lowest growth last year due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the prospects for the growth do remain strong, and my colleagues in this webinar will be able to address this much better than I can. Nevertheless, it is important to highlight that growth is not happening evenly across the continent. There is clear and considerable variations across countries and regions. And you can see this if you go to the next slide, please. Economic growth, unfortunately, has not addressed the issue of poverty and inequality. And in particular, it has not led to more and better jobs. As such, it is projected that while absolute global poverty will continue to decline, if given the current trends, the continent will continue to suffer from persistent poverty. So the rate of African growth has been well below demand. Why is that? Well, a lot of it has to do with the structure of African economies. And if you please can go to the next slide. African economies, African countries are extremely rich in natural resources. And as you can see from the map here, the image on your left-hand side, there isn't really almost a natural resource that you can't find in the continent, from oil and gas to minerals to agricultural products and so on. But the challenge is that the African economy still remain dependent on the export of these primary resources while importing finished goods. And while export revenues do remain important for financing development, resource-driven economies do not create the jobs needed on the continent. And you will see in the second image how the difference between the imports and exports between sub-Saharan African countries and its main trading partners, some of the main trading partners. And therefore, in order to address this imbalance, governments in the continent are seeking to move their economies away from resource-fueled development towards industrialization and development of the manufacturing sector. So the increased interest by investors in the continent presents an opportunity for solidifying the level of growth experienced by countries in the region, in the continent. But this can only happen if future investments can lead to economic transformation through, again, diversification, industrial development, and access to regional and international markets. African governments are starting to take a more proactive stance with partners in an effort to secure this level of this sort of development and secure favorable terms. But unfortunately, Africa currently has less than 3% share of global trade. And the growing trend towards protectionism across the global economy is a risk for the continent. Its fractured internal markets also means that trade within Africa is lower than for any other region on the globe, with intra-Africa trade before the introduction of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement standing just to 18% of overall exports. Intra-Europe trade, which is one of the highest, is about 70%. So if you move to the final slide, this is why the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is vital and why it received the level of political support it did by African countries. Trading under the AfCFTA started in January this year. Just over a year, it came into force in May 2019. The agreement has been signed by all AU member states except for Eritrea, and so far 36 countries have deposited their instruments of ratification. It is expected that the AfCFTA will improve regional companies' access to new markets, and for this to enable them to scale up and improve their competitiveness with positive impact on job creation and on poverty reduction. And what does this mean for international investors is that the AfCFTA will make African countries' markets that are currently too small to attract the level of investments and interests more attractive, because it does enable access to a bigger market by just investing in a single one. I think I've taken a lot more of the time that was allocated to me, so I do apologize for that. So I'll finish here and hand over to you, Marco.
Tigisi, that was brilliant. Thank you for that in-depth review and commentary on Africa. And it's a perfect introduction to Albert from GEPA, the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, to give a flavor and sense of the opportunities that exist within the African nations themselves. Albert.
Thank you very much, Marco. My name is Albert Kasim Diura, like it has been mentioned earlier by way of introduction. I'm the Deputy CEO in charge of Human Resource and Administration. Ghana Export Promotion Authority was established about a little over 50 years ago in 1969. It is under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and our mandate is to develop, promote, and facilitate the trade of non-traditional exports. We are the trade promotion, the National Trade Promotion Organization, and so we are responsible to actually drive the export trade of Ghana. With the coming into being of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, Ghana were poised to really be proactive. So right from the presidential level, that is the government level, to the institutions, that is through the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, that is the TPO of the nation, we, as a way of being proactive, have come together to really plan and take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I'm sure because of our proactiveness and the preparation, we are really not surprised that at the end of the day, Ghana is even the host nation of the Secretariat. And we are very happy and proud of that. But fast forwarding, what advantages are we going to derive as the host nation and Africa as a whole? Looking at the advantages that we seem to get, Ghana Export Promotion Authority was mandated by the Ministry of Trade and Industry to develop a national export development strategy document. This document was actually put together by over 100 institutions. So what it means is that we wanted it to have a national touch. And so we came together to put this document together. And the essence is actually to prioritize, because we have a lot of export opportunities. But then to maximize profit, we need to prioritize the product that we think that when we are able to get investors to come in, we will actually take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So Ghana Export Promotion Authority has taken the lead institution, and then we have other sister institutions, and then we're able to put up this document together. So the day we were actually launching the document, we had the blessing of no less a person than the President of the Republic, together with the Minister in charge of Trade and Industry, and of course, the CEO of Ghana Export Promotion Authority. We actually launched this noble document, and we are actually going to use it as our working tool to really take advantage. And so among some of the 17 prioritized products that we have actually put together to take advantage of the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is looking at our cocoa derivatives. So we are looking at the cocoa that we have. We are often proud to say the Ghanaian cocoa is the best cocoa in the world. And so the chocolate that you see, we believe that every cocoa in the chocolate, to get the taste and the flavor, then that cocoa might be coming from Ghana. We are often proud to say that. And so there's huge investment opportunity in the cocoa derivative sector that we really have put on top of our list, that if we are able to expand that sector, we will really take advantage of the African market. We all know, like earlier speakers have mentioned, the size of the market in terms of population, about 1.3 billion people with a GDP of about 1 trillion. So we see this as a huge market. And the sad aspect is, over the years, research have shown that among ourselves, the trading among ourselves is a paltry, maybe 15%. And so we have come to realize that there's a huge market, even if we just want to trade among ourselves. So the cocoa sector is something we intend taking to the next level. And so on top of the 17 prioritized products, cocoa is #1. We are also looking at the textile, garment, and apparel sector. And we have realized that over the years, we've all heard and we are aware of AGWA. I mean, Ghana, we've not even scratched the surface. And so for us, this is a huge opportunity if we are able to really market it very well, prioritize it, and get the necessary and needed infrastructure. Of course, it's capital intensive, but if we are able to put our house together and get the necessary, the needed investment, and put resources together to embark on this journey of textile, garment, and apparels, it's a huge investment area that we think we can take advantage of. The government have also not sit aloof, but they have a lot of flagship programs going forward to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. We have flagship programs like Planting for Food and Export, and that is PED. So we are looking at some tree crops, notable among that because we have cocoa that I've mentioned about. So notable among these tree crops, we are also looking at rubber, we are looking at cashew, we are looking at palm kernel. And so it's a whole area that the government have various flagship programs. We also have the Planting for Food and Jobs. This, the government want to even have one village, one dam to make sure that throughout the year, we will have the agriculture raw materials. And like earlier mentioned, Africa is known for raw materials. And so we have actually prioritized some of these raw materials, and we intend taking it to the next level. So cashew is another tree crop that we intend to really invest heavily. And so the government even have a 10-year development plan for cashew. We are barely about 2 or 3 years. And so we still have about 7 years. If we are able to develop this sector very well, it's an area that we can really take advantage of. Out of about 16 regions in Ghana, basically cashew can grow in about 13 or 14 out of the 16 regions. So cocoa can really not grow in all parts of the country, but cashew can grow about 16. Out of the 16, we can grow cashew in about 13 or 14 regions. So it's an area when we focus on, it can really challenge our cocoa. So we also have industrial starch, we have industrial salt, we have aluminum plastics, we also have automobile. Quite recently, the president has launched VW to have assembly plants here, so that we are often proud to say that Ghana is the center of the world. And so if the Africa Continental Free Trade Secretariat is here in Ghana, then the automobile industry, if we have the assembly plants here, then we can assemble and distribute in the sub-region and the entire continent. So we have come to realize that if we prioritize our product and get the needed investment, then we will really be taking advantage of the African market and even beyond. And we have also not just prioritized the product. In the strategic document, we have 3 pillars that supports the National Export Development Strategy document. The pillar 1, we are talking about broadening the base. The pillar 2, we are talking about the institutions that regulate our export. And the more importantly, for us at Ghana Export Promotion Authority, more importantly, is the pillar 3, which is about capacity building. And Ghana Export Promotion Authority, over the years, like I said, we are 50 years in existence. We have our export school. The export school, which we intend to even upgrade and take it to the next level, is to actually train the capacity of our exporters, especially the youth. We want to hit the interests of the youth. And so at Ghana Export, we have a flagship program known as Youth in Export. We also have what we call one district, one exportable product. So these are very unique to us as Ghana Export Promotion Authority, how we can have all our districts to identify, among other things, the 17 prioritized products, develop it by in terms of volumes, and government also have a flagship program known as what is it called? One.
Unfortunately, I think we've lost Albert there. The technology. Hopefully, he'll be able to, Albert, you'll be able to patch in again. But that was a brilliant, informative. Oh, Albert, terribly sorry, we lost you momentarily.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, like I was saying, the government have an industrialization agenda. And so every district is supposed to have a factory. And we also intend at Ghana Export, by way of increasing the capacity of our raw material, we also have every district should have raw materials, hopefully within the 17 prioritized products, so that we can feed into the factory just to add value to our raw material, because we have realized that time has come for us to really go value addition instead of being known for the raw material export. And so these are some of the preparations. And like I said, the third pillar is about the capacity building. And having our export school, we have actually come to realize that if we build the capacity, especially the youth and our existing exporters and potential exporters, if we build their capacity, then they will be competitive enough to take advantage of the African market. The export school is currently even collaborating with the Institute of Exports and International Trade, as well as ITC, to develop some specific models so that we can have students to enroll just to build their capacity. So this is actually our pillar 3 in the strategic document, to build the capacity of the individual to take advantage of the market, and also to be very competitive. So at Ghana Export Promotion Authority, we have been very proactive as I speak. The strategic document has become our working document. It has become the nation's strategy. And every organization, the Standards Authority, the Food and Drugs Authority, like I said, about over 100 institutions came together to put the document. And so they all have a role to play in the document, so that at the end of the day, the entire country will take huge opportunity that awaits us at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So we've been very proactive, we've prioritized product, and we are working in collaboration with other existing institutions, and of course with the ITC and Institute of Export, to build capacities just to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So we are very poised, and we know that at the end of the day, Ghana will be the winner. Thank you very much for now.
Brilliant, Albert. What a fantastic introduction and exposition of the opportunities and the great efforts that Ghana is making. Thank you. And now to our final speaker, Ibukun.
Marco, good afternoon to you, and also to the Morgan Allen team. Thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to be to share a platform with two excellent speakers, and Albert and Tegiste. You're both hard acts to follow. Albert, as a very, very proud Nigerian, I got slightly worried when you began by telling us that Ghana has the best chocolate in the world. Now, I'm happy you mentioned the best chocolate in the world as opposed to the best jollof rice, but that's something I think you and I will take offline. My name is Ibukunna Adebayo. It's my pleasure to be here. I am, as introduced, the co-head of emerging markets at the London Stock Exchange Group. A very short plug for London Stock Exchange. We are a global market infrastructure, recently merged with Thomson Reuters Refinitiv business to become also the world's largest data business as well. We have a very distinct footprint in Africa, in particular providing capital across the value chain all the way from sovereigns down to private companies who are keen to use London's markets and London's expertise to raise growth capital. I'm very much here to talk about some of the opportunities that exist in Africa, but in doing so, I may have to also outline some of the challenges. But I think one of the most resilient things about the continent is that Africa has learned to turn its challenges into positive opportunities. So I'd like to highlight some of those as we go along. I think we all know the numbers, but Marco had alluded to at the beginning that Africa has suffered in 2020 a fairly deep recession, approximately 2.5, 2.6%, according to IMF. And in fact, that number was the worst on record. As a continent that's been growing in the way Tegisi showed in her presentation, this is something that I think Africans are not used to. And I think also what we're not used to is the projected growth for the next 5 years, which is going to be the slowest amongst all of the world's regions. So Africa, again, by the IMF's projections, is only looking to grow at an average growth rate per annum of about 3.4%. And GDP per capita will not reach pre-pandemic levels until about 2025. So the gap between Africa and the rest of the world is set to widen. But how can Africa turn that into a positive opportunity? Now, there are divergences, obviously, across the continent. So you have the oil exporting countries whose GDP to capita growth is set to fall by 5% between now and 2025. But the non-resource intensive countries, their GDP the same rate, GDP to capita rate is set to grow by 21%. So some significant opportunities will come in those countries that are not focused on the further development of fossil fuels and have diversified their economies enough to take good advantage of all of the benefits that we've heard today about the Continental Free Trade Agreement. I'd like to say one or two things about population. And again, Africa has always looked at population as an opportunity. In particular, there was the rise of the middle class and the consumer opportunity that affluence and population growth will naturally bring. And I think that continues to exist, but I think there are a number of additional opportunities, including the ability to grow back better, and in particular, start the transition in Africa on energy. So if we are going to have 2 billion people plus on the continent by 2030, how do we ensure that the mix between fossil fuel generated energy and renewable sources are at more of a balance with what's happening with the rest of the world? And I think that that's something that's very important, that is a discussion point. It's not central and focused compared to all of the challenges, but I think it's very, very important. Let me give you one or two examples of where we believe that policy change is needed. In a country like Nigeria, which has abundant resources in oil and gas, there are still subsidies that are being provided to those that are starting off new oil or gas projects, whilst on the other hand, there are taxes on, for example, the commencement of certain new solar projects. This is something that has to change. This is something that policymakers have to look at in more depth in order to create the opportunities of growth led by renewable energy opportunities moving forward for the continent. Money will flood in, and opportunities will rise just even from fixing or trying to fix the energy problem across Africa. Now, in addition to that, there are global covenants that, again, don't make sense in the energy mix opportunity. And one of those, for example, is the offset market. Many countries around the world have announce their net zero plans by 2030, 2040, 2050. In order to do that, there is a mechanism whereby investors or countries who are heavy emitters can invest into projects into countries around Africa in particular. And there used to be a clean development mechanism that would allow for carbon credits to be issued by, for example, Nigerian solar projects to, for example, heavy emitters like airlines across Europe. But today there's something that restricts that from happening. The UN Climate Actions piece only allows these CDM projects to become offset opportunities in the least developed countries. That excludes countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Morocco, countries where, and Ghana, that equally have the most growth potential, yet no offset opportunity for those particular clean development type of opportunities. So that's something at a global level that needs to be looked at and addressed. The final thing I'd like to say, because I appreciate we're probably quite light on time, is the current debt situation across Africa. Now, whilst we are extremely welcoming of the G20's plans to suspend bilateral debt for most African nations, and a number of countries have taken advantage of that, some haven't. And we also welcome the common framework on debt that's going to require some global support moving forward. Africa still has this issue of the debt overhang. And that debt overhang, and particularly needs to service that debt, is crushing and crippling. And I won't go into examples right now, but for example, Zambia, as you know, has very recently had to default on certain debt because of its inability to pay the debt. Now, one thing that's extraordinarily interesting and very important, and I talk on this basis as a director, for full disclosure, a director of a business called Restitution Impact, which is an impact finance litigator. There are, on an annual basis, nearly $100 billion of illicit financial flows from Africa out into jurisdictions like Caribbean islands, in Dubai, in London, in New York, where this capital has been enabled by international financial institutions, the people that make the tax structures, the people who provide the company structures to allow these illicit flows to come out. Now, at $100 billion every single year, that would actually make Africa a net exporter of credit. Now, imagine if that money were to come back to Africa. Imagine what that could do in terms of meeting national economic transformation plans. Imagine what would happen if you could build roads and schools. Imagine what you could do in terms of fighting the pandemic if you were able to bring back money which is effectively stolen patrimony, money that's leaked from state-owned enterprises, money that's been enabled by these advisor enablers across these international jurisdictions. What Restitution Impact has done has created a brand new model for working in partnership with African governments in order to bring back stolen patrimony. It works by identifying claims which are in various international jurisdictions and bringing them together and purchasing those claims from governments and using civil enforcement techniques to bring back money. This is not a new thing. Nigeria's been bringing back money. The Philippines have been bringing back money for many, many years. The issue is about the speed, and the issue is also about the civil versus criminal enforcement intentions. With every single transaction in terms of bringing back money, for example, the Sani Abacha money, which was brought back to Nigeria very recently, it's $300 million. It took nearly 15 years for that money to come back, at which time Nigeria has been experiencing its problems. Companies like Restitution aim to bring back that money through civil proceedings only. The criminal things you can leave to the national crime agencies and others. But this is a very important opportunity for Africa to start to bring back stolen patrimony and put it to work in today's to meet today's economic challenges. On the interest of time, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Ibukun, brilliant, and thank you. Of course, when looking at the tremendous opportunities that exist for investment, partnership, business development in and with Africa, it's quite right to also appreciate that there are challenges to that investment as well. I'll now ask the panel to switch their cameras on and to turn their microphones live, and we will enter into a broader and wider discussion. And I'm going to seize chair's privilege, if that's okay, because the presentations have raised a number of important questions for me that I'd like to ask, and then we'll revert to the questions that were sent in previously. I was struck particularly, obviously, by Albert's impassioned detailing of the Ghana government strategy for development and investment, but also, Ibukun, the point that you raise, and Tegisti, it's linked to Tegisti's comments with regards to the urbanization of Africa, and therefore the green sustainability agenda and the access to investment and support and capital markets to turn that into reality. And I wonder if maybe if we start with you, Ibukun, you could just highlight where the potential opportunity sits, particularly around that sustainable investment.
Yeah, sure. And I think you're absolutely right. The biggest opportunity that we see around sustainable energy is the opportunity to obviously create more jobs and to create and remove some of the elements that continue to plight the growth opportunities in Africa. Now they're significant from the sense that capital markets should be providing more of a role in doing this. Now that hasn't been the case for many reasons. A lot of the African markets are not yet ready to use the sophisticated tools that are out there in other international markets, such as green bonds and transition bonds, sort of green ETFs and the like. But I think things are very much changing. And one of the things that London Stock Exchange Group has been deeply engaged in is how do you make capital markets more of an enabler for this sustainable energy transition. And I think the work that's going in there is something that we are keen to share with more policymakers and to actually create more opportunity. Let me just say before I hand over to someone else on that point, the free trade area, or agreement rather, will create significant opportunities. Let me give you a couple of stats just to highlight that around capital markets. So you have a market today of, let's say, Ghana, Morocco, and Nigeria. It's about $179 billion worth of market cap, which is not huge for three of the largest stock exchanges in the region, obviously ex-South Africa. Now, in the Caribbean and Latin America and under the Asia Pacific agreements that were similarly signed previously, there was exponential growth in the capital markets in those specific countries that were related to all of the major factors that a trade agreement of that nature can bring. We could see something very similar happen to Africa and African capital markets, that they become more fit for purpose. So sustainability is just one angle in terms of capital market development, but the free trade agreement will lead to bigger, bolder, more robust, deeper capital markets for Africa, undoubtedly.
Brilliant, thank you, Ibukun. And Albert, how do you see the free trade, continental free trade agreement impacting that sustainable growth agenda?
Yeah, if you look at the population size, especially with the youthful and exuberant population that we have, we are of the view that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is now an opportunity for us to trade deeply, first of all, among ourselves, so that it's time for us to rather look inward before we even look outward. And it's also an opportunity to make trade very attractive to the youth. And that is why we think that it is time for us to be very focused and prioritize, because it's such a huge market and you may not be the only one doing a particular thing. And so we are also thinking that it is time for us to build synergies. It is time for us to have partnership, both local and international, so that at the end of the day, we should be able to take the real advantage. Like I rightly said, even before the coming into being of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, we knew of AGWA in the US market. But the question is, I mean, what advantage have we been able to take as a result? It's all about building the infrastructure. And if you were thinking that Ghana alone can't do it, it's now clear and dawn on us that it is better you come together and have a stronger partnership to take advantage, instead of ordinarily thinking that you can do it all by yourself. And for us, it is even more clear. COVID has come to add more eye-opener that, look, it is not all about probably trading physically, but you can also look elsewhere and also trade. So the IT industry in Africa is a huge area that we need to look at to see how we can build the IT infrastructure to take advantage of the market. So I think that we all know basically, like I said, the opportunity that awaits us, but how to really take advantage of it is what we should all be gearing towards. And I think that one key area is JVs, joint venture agreement, both local and international, and also building synergies for stronger businesses.
Brilliant, Albert, thank you. And you raise a very important point. Tigisi, I'd value your view from Chatham House's more strategic overview, the impact of that rapid urbanization, but also the requirement, the need for investment in infrastructure, particularly the IT infrastructure, but the potential to leapfrog ahead because of the move direct to digital and mobile. And Tigisi, I'd just value your sense of where the opportunities may lie.
Yeah, so...
oh, sorry, Albert, if I just ask Tigisi, sorry.
So the infrastructure building is going to be extremely critical, whether it's at urban level or continental. I mean, we're all extremely excited about the African Continental Trade Agreement, but actually infrastructure building will also be critical for the effective implementation, because currently the level of connectivity within the continent is very poor. And the level of infrastructure development needed is extremely high. So this will need to be developed. And of course, the urbanization is here, where more and more people are moving to the cities. And it's expected that most Africans in the next 20 years will be living in cities. Are cities ready for the level of population, of the demographic shift that we'll be overseeing? Most are still in the process of being developed. So the infrastructure is a huge gap. Another key thing, increasingly, what we haven't really discussed here is technology. Africa is embracing technology in a way that is extremely exciting. There is a lot of exciting developments in the continent and a lot of opportunities, of course, emerging every day. And how the continent is embracing technology is quite. It's quite telling of the interest to explore new ways to find solutions for its many challenges. But of course, within this, we also have to point out that the governance structure required for technology, including for technology, is still in the process of being developed. So there's a lot of, there are still many challenges to be overcome, but the opportunities and the prospects are there, because there's a lot of developments that we see regularly emerging from the continent.
Brilliant. Tigisi, thank you for that. I was drawn by Albert's comment with regards to automotive, and of course, with the potential for broadening the supply chain, the manufacturing, the high-tech manufacturing supply chain, and how COVID, possibly with the rehoming of production, actually provides a huge potential for Africa, not just to service its own market, but actually to feed into the European and in fact the American markets as well. I just wondered if maybe Albert, you have a view on that.
Yes, so like I said, going forward to identify some of the opportunities, even long before, like I said, before the inauguration and the coming into being of the Africa Trade, the president have an industrialization agenda plan, and this is a national, from the national point of view. So the automobile industry, I think it's a VW and other automobile industry that have been identified to actually set up their plants right here in Ghana. And so, like you rightly said, these are we are looking at probably the cost and proximity. And we think that if it is really stationed in Ghana here, maybe the cost of production might be something that we can take advantage of. And so, like I rightly said, it's not only the automobile industry, because the agenda is to industrialize. We are looking at a more sector, but we know that the Africa market, like we all know, is that huge. And so you need to also identify some of the gaps in terms of the imports. And so if you look at the gaps in terms of the import, then you try to fill in the gap. And so this is one huge area that our government have identified, and we have taken advantage to really set up the assembling plants here to see how best we can feed the African market and beyond. So it's all about the industrialization agenda.
Brilliant, thank you. Which I think dovetails into Ibukun, that access to capital. Sorry, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to very quickly pick up on Albert's point and corroborate it with a statistic, which is from the African Development Bank, which is that for every equal dollar that's put into manufacturing, so FDI going into manufacturing in Africa, you create 17 times more jobs than you do for money going into the sort of fossil fuel sector. So everything points towards, this free trade agreement points towards solving many challenges across Africa, including the employment one, which is one that is affecting that youthful population we talk about. So it's essential and imperative that countries are in this free trade agreement getting their act together, which they are. And some of the issues around the trade concessions between countries, and in particular that ability to create that value chain in Africa is imperative moving forward. But it's such a great opportunity that Africa is on the cusp of.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ibukun. And Tigisi, we've got the G7 taking place. We've got the G20 later on this year. We've got the WTO Ministerial Conference later this year, COP26. You know, it's a year of activity, pan-national focus on trade and development. What do you think are going to be the key messages, or what would you hope would come out of these major events?
As Ibukun pointed earlier, one of the key challenges that we have in the coming years in the continent is the resurgence of debt. So there will be a lot of discussion around that and how to service that, whether it's debt cancellation or forgiveness. That will be key. In addition to this, of course, what we have not discussed is the increasing number of summits that we see, the Africa summits. Of course, most of this won't happen this year because of the pandemic, but we will have a very crowded space of summits as well next year. A lot of this are in fact about investment opportunities, whether it's the UK Africa Investment Summit that was also held virtually this year, expected to be held next year again, but also the EU Africa. We'll see whether FOCAC happens this year, likely that it will happen next year. India, Turkey, so there's a lot of Africa's partners looking to hold summits. But what we often don't discuss is what is it there for African countries? Why are African countries engaging in this gatherings? Of course, in order for countries to achieve the economic recovery that is much needed after the that they're experiencing at the moment, and also have the meaningful socioeconomic transformation that these countries need. They need to be able to influence the global governance system and to also be able to shape the rules and the norms to their benefits. And this is quite critical. The continent is a strong advocate for the multilateral trading system. And however, today,
Tigiste, your microphone seems to have muted, or we've slightly lost you. Oh,
I'm not sure.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry about that. So I'm not sure where you stopped hearing me, but and I was saying that the continent is a strong advocate for the multilateral trading system, for example. But to date, the African Union still doesn't have an observer status at the WTO, despite the many diplomatic efforts. And this is, and it's important, for example, that we have a prominent African woman leading the WTO, an indirect way of influencing the agenda to the benefit of the African continent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of questions. Sorry, I know we're slightly overrunning, but I think it will be worth posting these and just getting your sense on them. Africa's export trade remains primarily commodities and goods. What do you think needs to happen to support the growth of African trade in services? And Tigiste, would you like to take that one first?
So what does it, it's, I think maybe my colleagues here who are more business focused will have a more immediate answer. I don't want to go into the structural issues again.
Yeah, Ibukun, do you have a view?
I do, but trying to condense it into a short one may be tricky. Yeah, what needs to happen to support the growth of services? Well, it's really again linked to the population opportunity in my opinion, and I think specifically African services needs to be essentially more Africanized. So, for example, sending starting up financial products, for example, that are not fit for purpose for the continent, for example, would needs to be something that policymakers, overseas participants needs to think about it a little bit more. How do you turn something into more of an African service? So, for example, we've seen the growth and development of some of these tech apps, around sort of logistics and sort of Uber type apps. These sort of things, I think, are fabulous opportunities, but they need to solve African problems. And I think if they're doing that rather than replicating overseas ideas, then you've got a winning start.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ibukun. And Albert, a question for you particularly is, what advice would you give to businesses looking to invest in or expand their markets in Africa? I'm going to guess you start with invest in cocoa, but
well, thank you very much. But let me also touch on a bit on the service exports. Yeah, so I think that it is time we also focus more. Enough of the raw material exports. For me, it is time we also focus on the service export. For instance, the tourism industry. We need to be able to market Africa well enough to make it a holiday destination, so that at least the tourist sector can boost up very well. And also the transportation industry. For example, key mention of poor infrastructure in Africa continent. And so this is an area, for example, the president of Ghana is building railway from Ghana to Burkina Faso. So if this railway is able to complete and successfully, then we are looking at boosting the transport industry in that regard. So it's about time we looked at the youthful age, if they can go into medical education, so that we can build a medical tourism and look at the educational infrastructure. For instance, partner with you alone to build the capacity of students is a service export, because at the end of the day, we are going to have a lot of students who will have the international knowledge and be able to compete favorably. So the service exports is an area that we need to look at very well. And yeah, thank you. So in coming to the question of access to capital, I think that Africa is actually the place to look at, because the return on investment, because we have, if you like, cheap labor, and once we have all that, if the return on investment is huge, when you look at Africa, and of course the raw material bit, like we said, is in abundance, and so it's cheap. So sourcing capital, it's all about, like I said, building stronger institutions, synergies, and be able to position yourself and be able to assess the capital market. We all know the globalization is making capital very scarce. And so it is about how you organize your table your opportunities. If you are able to table the opportunities and people see real return on their investment, of which Africa is very promising. Africa is very promising when it comes to return on the capital investment. I'm sure we will be getting a lot of capital. People will like to divert their businesses. And then even the continental free trade area, like we agree, we have a deficit in infrastructure, but then it is also another opportunity to even invest in the infrastructure in the first place. It's also another opportunity to even invest in the infrastructure to see how best we can take advantage, because this has come to stay. And if it has come to stay, every disadvantage becomes an opportunity if you really look at it. And like I said, the return on investment is very huge in Africa.
Brilliant. Albert, thank you for that. I have one short question specifically for you, Ibukun, that's been asked. And then I've got one final question for the panel, if that's okay. And Ibukun, it's to do with the repatriation of the money that's been taken out of Africa. And the question is, how do you make sure that then, once it's been repatriated, is not looted again?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and one that has been solved for. So there's a concept that the governments are mulling over now called managed repatriation, which means that before the government enters into these types of negotiations, and this is not a question of moral imperialism, but the governments themselves have to be anti-corruption minded, potentially sometimes newly democratic. They subscribe to the types of programs that we've just mentioned. So the programs that we've been discussing have been, for example, how to fund and empower female-run businesses, yes, hardcore infrastructure projects, and so on and so forth. But the important difference here is that they also subscribe to being monitored by civil society organizations. And that ensures that money is going directly from the repatriation pot into these specific projects and being continuously monitored on an ongoing basis and reported back on. And I think this is something that has been, it hasn't been tried before, but ultimately has worked in, for example, the recent Nigeria case that I've mentioned, where civil society has been reporting back on monies that's gone into roads and bridges, etc. So it's a good question, but it has been solved for.
Brilliant, Ibukun, thank you for that. Then a final question. I'll start with Albert. If you were to give a single piece of advice, and it's very difficult to condense it all down, but a single piece of advice to any business, any organization, any individual who is looking to invest in Africa, what would that one piece of advice be?
Well, I will say a piece of advice that I will give to any potential investor, first of all, is to say you should look at the Africa continent and actually focus clearly on some of the major and huge opportunities. So my single advice will be take advantage of the market size, with a youthful and exuberant age. Then you can tailor-made your product. I mean, to target, if you like, the youth, and that is a huge potential area. And we all know, like from the beginning, we've all been talking about the opportunities here, and like I said, we all know that. But the issue is the proper research that one will have to carry out and really invest. And so the single advice I will give is Africa is very promising on return on your investment. Very, very, very promising on return on your investment. Just that you will have to, as it were, do due diligence, do proper research because of the infrastructure deficit. And like I said, in some of the areas, if you maybe venture into where we have very huge infrastructure deficit, maybe you will have challenges. So the advice I will give is, first of all, you do your research, but you just have to believe and know that if it is, we have almost everything in abundance. The raw materials is so huge. The population is there of 1.3 billion people. I mean, a GDP of 1 trillion, a very youthful, exuberant age bracket. And so for me, if you do your research very well, I think that it's obvious that return on your investment is very much assured. So this is what I will advise every potential investor to do. And Ghana is very beautiful. So you should be able to come, like I was talking about our tourism, come over and stay, do your research, and then you can properly invest.
Brilliant. Albert, I am certain with your energy, your enthusiasm, there is no opportunity other than that Ghana will be a huge success. So thank you, Albert. Ibukun, just to you, just quickly, one short piece of advice.
My short piece of advice would be to invest in managing your risk. Forget about the return. Africa has all of the returns, but today there are many things you can do to invest in managing your risk. Your currency risk can be managed through various products, through various ideas, thought through beforehand. The political issues that Tagisti mentioned can be managed. There's risk insurance, there's everything. And even if you do that, there will be plenty of upside for you to experience by investing on the continent.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ibukun. And finally, but certainly not least, Tagisti, from your point of view.
From my point of view, it's important to think that actually they need to think long term. It's not just about the immediate returns. And as we kept on saying through this webinar, and as Ibukun put it really nicely, the political or whether the different risks can be managed, but also to think that it's a big continent. So if there are risks in one part of the continent, there are many others where they can look at. But even within countries, there are different opportunities. Take Nigeria. We talk a lot about insecurity in the north, but Lagos is a great investment opportunity, for example. So actually, do think beyond what you see in the news, what the narrative is, to actually really explore where the true opportunities are, and there are many.
Brilliant, Tigisi. And I was struck, actually, and I should know this because I'm a geography graduate, but when you see the continent of Africa and you overlay the other nations, the other continents into Africa, it just does make you realize that the incredible scale of the continent. Like you say, it is a vast continent, and the nations themselves are large and have huge potential. I make no apology for the fact that we have overrun the time on this webinar, because the quality of the contribution from each of the speakers has been exceptional, hugely enlightening, and I genuinely appreciate the opportunity that Stefano and Morgan Allen have offered for me to host, to listen and learn from this incredibly informed panel. So thank you very much. And Stefano, I hand back to you, but I'd like to thank each of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marco, for coordinating in such a brilliant way this panel. And of course, I need to thank all the panelists, Tigisi, of course, and to the two proud Nigerian and Ghanaian guys. I can offer by sure, let's say, the possibility to let me assess and taste some cocoa beans and chocolate coming from both from Ghana and Nigeria, and I can assure you I will provide you a very impartial judgment on this.
Don't forget
exactly. I'm sure Tigisi and Marco are happy to join for this. Okay. So thanks all really for this fantastic panel, and for accepting to participate. The last thing for all the attendees, thank you very much for being with us today, and stay tuned on us because we are going to, let's say, organize some other very interesting panel very, very soon in the next few weeks. Bye-bye, and thank you.
Thank you.